What do you think of when you think of a dead language? You probably think of Latin, maybe Anglo-Saxon if you're especially educated. But one thing that you might not think about is most academic discourse, or in fact, most discourses altogether. For James Joyce, when he saw any language, he saw a medium teeming with potential, but one that is often not tapped into. There are a variety of associations, and the goal of language in its typical form for Joyce is to actually subdue the brain's ability to create and attach to the variety of associations present. In his work, Finnegans Wake, he seeks to go beyond that, and he seeks to find the associations inherent in language, and in particular, find out what makes language living. And for Joyce, what makes language alive is sound. Because sound is what actually reifies the language on the page. It's what takes it from something dead that's only used on the page to something that we actualize through speech acts. And these speech acts take on a number of different forms. They are, for example, the way in which nature itself speaks, through the various sounds it makes, and Joyce will epitomize this through things like onomatopoeia. It's also the way in which we use music, for example. This is another way in which we sing, right? But fundamentally, what James Joyce wants to reach, and I'm going to go through this kind of sequentially in the order that I'm following here, to finally showing language itself as fundamentally concerned with the sonorous nature of signifiers. That we're taking something conceptual, and this is the reason that Finnegans Wake is such a difficult book to read, is it's addressing hyper-conceptual questions about the nature of language in a hyper-non-conceptual medium, that being the domain of everyday speech, kind of accentuated to the extreme. James Joyce is trying to talk about two ways of thinking about the world, the static and the dynamic. And the static is represented by masculinity, by the obstinacy of Humphrey Chimpton Earwicker, HCE. HCE epitomizes phallic power, assertiveness, being able to stay true in the face of impending nature and not change. And as such, he is something artificial, something which must stand against nature and assert himself in a heroic manner. But on the other hand, you have the living nature of Anna Livia Pluribel, who represents femininity, the burgeoning and flowering nature of the given, the propensity for change and dynamism amidst what seems like static universals. And this is something that, for example, he's getting from Nietzsche, where Nietzsche is talking about the way in which values depend on fighting against this tendency for them to change, from the impending sort of élan vital of the universe itself. And these two are constantly trying to negotiate each other's boundaries, such that identity is always liminal, always in question, always kind of, it's not permanent. And as such, Joyce wants to really bring that out in language by showing the ways in which language is indebted to nature, for example. And he's very good at talking, especially about water. From the moment that I was introduced to Joyce in Ulysses, and I was enthralled by this Proteus episode, the third episode of Ulysses, where Stephen Dedalus is walking along the Sandymount Strand, which is on the eastern bay of Dublin. And Stephen is walking with his eyes closed, and he's listening to all the sounds that's going on, and it's this meditation on nature and perception and sound and whatnot. And that's really the burgeoning, you see this in Portrait of the Artist too, where Stephen Dedalus, who is an autobiographical or semi-autobiographical portrayal of Joyce, is learning the sonorous kind of dynamism and excitingness bred into language, that language itself is something Dionysian, which propels itself outward into the world. It's active and it fights to have itself maintained even through its changes. So we get this moment, for example, and this is near the end of the first of the 4 parts of Finnegans Wake, where ALP is being discussed, and she's something which is slipping out of a gap in a devil's glen. She's able to sin, in a sense. She's able to willingly compel herself to change, and this is what she does. Joyce writes, "Drop me the sound of the fine horn's name, but to toy, some bogger was witness, and drip me why in the Flanders was she frickled, and tickle me through was she Marcella waved, or was it weirdly a wig she wore? And which side did they droop their glows and their florty, a back to whist or a front to see? In fear to hear the deer so near, and longing loth and loathing longing. Are you in the swim or are you out? Oh, go in, oh, go on, go on." So he's just obsessed with the notion of the sounds of the sea, of the going in and out. This is the sort of rhythm of the eternal return that Nietzsche talks about. And he's really trying to talk about, being tricked here. This is playing into the notion of what it means to live in a world of relativism and opinion, and how to navigate these social situations, because of course this is a microcosm of the sort of chaos that is the social world, and how we ought to deal with that. And one of the ways that we announce ourselves socially is through music. It's one of the ways that we identify different cultures with each other and talk about them. And Joyce often parodies music in Finnegans Wake. And it's really interesting and very disturbing, and in kind of a Pynchonian fashion, where Pynchon will just go from talking about a plot to going straight into a song. And there will be no kind of chance to catch our feet. We just suddenly are in a song, and that comes with it, a metric establishment and rhyming and things like this, and a different formal layout on the page. And Joyce will suddenly turn into these onomatopoeic, alliterative, kind of phoneme-based approaches to language, which kind of blurs the difference between our everyday spoken language and music. And his point is that music performance itself is equivalent to language. He says, "The fulmore's in his fin, the mulmore's her and hin, a power alone, and Dublin's all a den. We'll sing a song of single month, and you'll too, and you'll hear our notes. Here's the key, 1, 2, 3, chorus. So come on, you wealthy gentrymen, wib through frocks full of fun. Thin, Theoli and Thelively, though Billy with the coo, for to jog a jig of a Christmas nice and sing a missal too. Hip champery, hip champery. Oh, you long-tailed black men, polk it up behind me. Hip champery, hip champery. And Jesse's push and pump kick round. And Alleluia. Right? So just this repetition of themes, they are almost like linguistic gestures of this hip champery, hip champery. And the counting off of 1, 2, 3, and chorus, as in, this is relating to the Latin that he's pulling from. And all of this is serving to blend language from the way that we typically think about it, which is an essentially descriptive medium that is not concerned with inflection. In fact, we try to standardize our inflection so it's very clear what we mean. But if you think about music is not descriptive or prescriptive. It is affective, and it begs to excite something in you. It's essentially excitative. And that's what makes it so unique as a medium that Joyce wants to play with. And he wants to focus on the way that language's relationship to the ear leads to a lot of interesting things. And the relationship between the eye and the ear, where this is something that Joyce even talked about in Proteus, when he's talking about nacheinander versus nebeneinander, these two kind of ways of perception where one is side by side, kind of sequentially, and one is like on top of the other. So vision is side by side. It's cinematic in a sense, right? You've got a series of images and they get collated together and they give you perception. And things happen one after the other. But with hearing, multiple things happen on top of each other in the same moment, such that you have the pregnancy of every single moment. And that's what Joyce wants to bring out. So the I is subject to representational thinking, where everything is laid out on a plane whereby it can become differentiated into different parts. But hearing acts based off of the seamless transition between things such that they can literally occupy the same space in almost a contradictory manner. And you can get the sort of linguistic overload that characterizes Finnegans Wake. He says regarding this kind of difference between the eye and the ear, "For he can eye spy through them to their self-colours, never the least their tissue peepers, meaning mulberry mesh, the time of appling flowers, a guarded figure of speech, a variety of perfume, a brigawall, sea mist and so on. As lightly as sea saw, oh my goodness, oh my greatness, oh my pricelessly precious, while dewfully as dim Doubulus, all a listen to his elixir." So we went from I spy at the beginning, and these tissue peepers, tissue paper, you're right, we're covering over the eyes with a veil like tissue paper, which of course the tissue paper is giving us some somewhat dirty connotations of defecation and the sort of perversity that kind of lingers throughout Finnegans Wake in a liminal way. And as such, these represent kind of the perverse blindfolds that we're putting on, and we're entering the really erotic level of listening. Because that's what Joyce wants to bring out, that there's something seductive about speech itself, something that really is a sonorous act which entices us. And I think this is a really good example, where he wants to show that when we speak, we are actuating a sonorous act where we assert ourselves into the void. This is essentially Dionysian. He says, "Spick spoke, spoken, so now be hushy, little pokers. Side here rohish, cleany fuglers, grandiciles all stays itty. Aldolterux, rest as before, for you've jolly welly dawdled all the day. When ye coive tentoncles hat, then'll be largely temps for that. Yet's the time for being now. Now, now. For a burning wold is coming to dance inain. Glamours hath moitered leap, and herefore colders must leap no more. Lack breath must leap no more. Lel lolls for Lieberman, libbling is lore. Lo, Lieberman, you love to be leaving Libnius. Lift your right to your liber lord. Link your left to your lass of liberty. La, Lieberman, your lep's but a loop to lee. A fork of hazel o'er the field to vox the vigorine virgin's ode. If you cross this road as you roam the rand, I'm blessed, but you'll feel him a blasting rod. Behind me, freeze from evil smells, perdition stinks before us." And he always finds a way to bring together the sublime and the profane in one here. We have this obsession with yet is the time for now, but it's yet apostrophe s, so as in the German, jetzt for now. Now's the time for being now. Now. It's obsessed with the current moment of what are we actually doing now. We're not thinking about linguistic prescriptivism as if it is some independent system of our speech. But what we call the English language is what Joyce wants to deconstruct here. He wants to show that all we have is what we're saying now. And we can play around with wordplay and with portmanteau words and things like this. And we can bring domains together that we didn't think were possible and create this aesthetic edifice such that we have this burning wood as in would be or could be as in future looking, which is also would as in knock on wood. And we're dancing. And our tongue starts dancing with this los for Lieberman libling is lore. Lo Lieberman, right? He just he's obsessed with the tongue because there's something erotic about the tongue. And that's the whole point. We're doing erotic things all the time here in the mouth. I mean, this is such a complicated dance. And Joyce just vomits this onto the page. And he says, so see we sow as seed we sow, which is so funny. He's saying that we see with our eyes the seeds which we sow, which is something communal, and it's also something individual. Speech acts really are our chance for interacting with each other. And he connects this to nature in an interesting way, where we are all bound by this natural kind of milieu that we're in. We're ultimately always in nature. And, language, it has this ability to open up a transferable, translatable medium from human to human for the reproduction of an essentially musical act. And this allows us to enter and support the sleeper in the medium of the night, because that's what Finnegans Wake is. It's James Joyce's Book of the Dark. As John Bishop, has written a fantastic book called Joyce's Book of the Dark. So what we're doing is we're going into sleep. And what is our way of translating between the day language, which is prescriptive and ideal, and the night language, which is unfettered and schizophrenic and wild and dancing? How do we bridge this? Sound. Because all throughout Finnegans Wake, what happens? Real sounds from the real world get filtered through and affected by the unconscious and come together such that the repressed unconscious is dealing with the real sounds which cannot be suppressed, which are always being filtered into the ears, which maintain a constant openness. You can't really close your ears when you're sleeping. I mean, your ears are still open. It's just your brain has to deal with what sounds are happening. That's why your alarm clock may sometimes, for example, be interpolated into your dream such that, I know this happens to me, the dream and the alarm clock come together such that I don't realize the alarm clock is something coming from without, but I assume that it's part of the dream and I can stay asleep. So we have this tricky relationship to sound where it needs to be disruptive and it needs to be exciting and Dionysian, and it can't become territorialized into Guattari's language. He writes, "For the clearer of the air from on high has spoken in tumbledom tambledam to his tambledom tumbledom world, and moog phonoised by that phonemenon, the inhabitants of the earth have terror-rumbled from firmament unto fundament, and from tweedle-deedle-deedle-doms down to tweedle-deedle-dees. Loud hear us, loud graciously hear us." So we're doing a prayer, right? But instead of Lord, it is loud. This is what is motivating Joyce's linguistic universe, is not phenomenon, but phonemenon. Phonemes, these basic elements of sound, like the la or the lo or ra or re, all of these stuff, especially the L and the r and the b and the p and the t, all of these very articulate or complicated sounds, he wants to bring out their expressive qualities. And he finishes really beautifully here, this part. This is the end of the first part of part 2. "Till tree from tree, tree among trees, tree over tree becomes stone to stone, stone between stones, stone under stone forever. O loud, hear thee, we beseech of each of these thy unlitten ones. Grant sleep in ours time, O loud, that they take no chill, that they do ming no murder, that they shall not go meet mad howia trees. Loud hear miseries upon us, yet entwine our arts with laughters low. Ha he he ho ho, mum mum." Right? So we go from this kind of schizophrenic state down into the mumbling, down into the subtlest noises that we can make. and we enter sleep. This is a sleep prayer asking us that sound will maintain us and be our savior of sorts, which is quite a fitting metaphor considering that this comes up like 2 paragraphs after this big, long Bible parody, essentially. So I hope that this helps make some sense of what is Joyce trying to do in Finnegans Wake. The more I learn about this book, just the more exciting it gets. And I think Joyce has such an affinity for sound that if anyone is a musician, you know how I feel. And if you're a lover of language, you know how I feel. And Joyce takes those and puts them together and gives us Finnegans Wake. So that being said, that's it for this lecture. Consider any of the other stuff that I've put out on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other literature. You can become a channel member for $5 a month and gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom, which you can tailor to your needs. I also have super thanks if you'd like to donate to the channel, because books are not cheap, and I'd appreciate anything you have to give, but no pressure. That's it for this lecture, and I will see you in another one.